Season's greetings! Hope everybody is good and welcome to a very special Christmas edition of Slimehouse TV. So I'm going to be doing something a bit random in today's episode, something a little bit unconventional, but stick with me and I guarantee it will all make sense by the end of the video. Christmas also for many is about bringing people together, so I've got a lot of my good friends joining me in today's episode, so if that sounds like a bit of you, then sit back, make sure you're comfy, and get ready for a very special Christmas edition of Slimehouse TV. Let's do this! So in today's episode, I'm going to be creating another action figure, but this time it's one with a twist. What kind of twist, I can hear you ask? Is it a Christmas-themed figure? No. It's actually a character from an old movie that I like. Ah, a Christmas movie, I can hear you thinking. No. And it's not even a character from one of those films that's debatably a Christmas movie, like Die Hard or Rambo First Blood or Lethal Weapon, one of those that people like to argue about. But like I said, stick with me and everything will make sense by the end of the video. So the movie in question, and the one that I'm going to be creating a toy based off today, is a 1986 time-travelling sci-fi action ensemble banger called Eliminators. So this film was directed by Peter Manoogian, who coincidentally is the same guy that directed Arena that we talked about in the last episode. And this is just one of them films that one look at the VHS cover and you're pretty much instantly sold. You've got people waving guns around, explosions, a ninja, and what in my opinion is probably one of the coolest cyborgs that's ever been put into any film ever. This dude, the Mandroid. And again, talk about a movie that you only have to look at the cover to know that you're probably going to be in for one of the best movie experiences of your entire life. Like, can you imagine? It's 1986, you go to your local video rental store or Blockbuster, you walk in and then you see that on the shelf, without question. This is the one that you're coming home with.
Each one is the ultimate specialist in his field.
Now, I've spoke about this film a bunch of times on this channel. It's always one of them that I bring up in conversations when I talk about hidden gems. And although there's a bunch of cool characters in this film that would all make for awesome action figures, obviously the most standout one of them all is the half-human, half-tank Mandroid. So if you've not already guessed it, that's the character that I'm going to be making a toy of in today's episode. And like I've said a couple of times now, that might not seem that Christmassy, but I guarantee, stick with me, it will all make sense by the end of the video. I will not let you down, especially at Christmas. And again, like I said in the intro, I've got a lot of friends joining me today, all bringing the Christmas cheer. So if at any point what I'm doing doesn't feel that Christmassy, don't worry, they're going to be making up for it. So as always, I jumped into Nomad Sculpt on the iPad and started roughing out the basic shapes that I'm going to need to make this action figure. Starting with his head, as that was going to be the most challenging part of this whole thing. Most of the time, when I'm making toys on this channel, I create some kind of monster, and with them you can be a lot more free and easy with the anatomy and stuff. But obviously, this guy has a very human face, and sculpting humans is probably one of the hardest things to get right. Thing is though, if I wanted to create something that was easy, I wouldn't have decided to create a human or a Mandroid half-tank, half-human. I'd have created another monster like Crushroom or Turgo. But no, I've only got myself to blame. Now you will have seen me sculpt toys like this quite a few times on this channel. I don't have to be explaining every single detail of this build, so it's probably a good time to bring on my first guest. Now if you're anything like me and you love vintage toys and action figures, you've probably watched a little show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us. Well, my friend Nick is actually the editor of that show, and he's not only a huge vintage toy collector and wicked videographer, but he's also 1/3 of what is without doubt my favourite toy channel on YouTube, The Secret Compartment Show. And when I asked him if he'd be able to come onto Slimehouse and share with us all a memory of Christmas past, he told me that he had just the story for this episode.
Silent night, holy night. Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. I'm Nick Farrell from The Secret Compartment. You know, if ever there was a time of year to feel nostalgic, it's the holiday season. Sure, when you think of Christmas, you think of twinkly lights and tasty treats and naked arm wrestling. Well, at least in my family we do. But more than anything, Christmas conjures memories. Memories like the time my dad fell off the roof hanging Christmas lights. Or the time my mom fell off the roof hanging Christmas lights. Or the time my dad fell off the roof hanging Christmas lights. Again. That was the last year we hung Christmas lights. But one memory that really sticks in my craw is from Christmas 1987. A few months earlier, my neighbor Greg got the real Ghostbusters firehouse for his birthday. Now, there was always a little bit of what I like to call toy competition between old Greg and I. He'd get something and I'd get jealous. I'd get something and he'd get jealous. I mean, you get the idea. But you see, old Greg was an only child, which meant he was a bit of a spoiled little cuss, which put me, one of two children, at a bit of a disadvantage. Thanks, Stephanie. But back to that firehouse. After seeing Greg's, I knew exactly what was going at the top of my Christmas list. That little snot was already a proton pack ahead of me. I wasn't gonna let him flaunt a firehouse with impunity too. And so Christmas morning came, and not only did there end up being a firehouse under the tree, but also an Ecto-1. Something Greg did not have. And so the day after Christmas, I triumphantly marched right over to Greg's house, chest puffed out, Ecto-1 in tow, ready to put that smug little brat in his place. The front door opened.
Look,
I proclaimed.
I got an Ecto-1. Me too,
Greg said. It was fine. He was an alright enough kid, and he liked Ghostbusters just as much as I did. And in fact, it was kind of a cool thing. I could be excited for me and for him. In fact, we were sharing the same Christmas memory. At least, partially. Because then Greg said,
look what else I got.
And as we turned the corner into the back den of his house, there it was.
It's the G.I. Joe Defiant Complex.
Nobody beats G.I. Joe.
It's awesome.
You know what? Greg. That little based. Now I'm Nick Farrell from The Secret Compartment. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Oh, I love that. I feel your pain, brother. I think we all had a neighbour like Greg growing up. Also, speaking of Ghostbusters, it's mad to look back and think just how popular that franchise was back then. I mean, it's still pretty big now, but back in the late 80s, it really was the one. In fact, this seems like a perfect time to bring on my next guest, because while we're talking about busting ghosts, I've got a friend over in Tokyo who also remembers a particular Christmas that he had as a kid that Ghostbusters played a very big part in making super special.
Hi there, and happy holidays from Tokyo. I've spent the last 15 to 20 years living in Japan, and Christmas isn't quite the same here. You'll see lots of decorations and things like that around, but nothing brings back those warm, nostalgic memories of Christmas morning growing up in Kentucky, waking up to glorious packages filled with things like Masters of the Universe figures and my personal favorite at the time, Kenner's Real Ghostbusters. From 1986 to 1989, I pretty much lived and breathed Ghostbusters, and one Christmas in particular during that time frame was one of my best Christmas memories ever. I don't recall if it was 86 or 87, but I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time, and I remember seeing a massive box with my name on it, not really knowing what it could have been. I got a lot of other Kenner Ghostbusters figures that year, and you can imagine my amazement when I unwrapped the box and discovered that it was a kid-size proton pack. Anyway, not only did this amazing box come with a proton pack, it also came with a PKE meter and a Ghostbusters logo armband. And of course, that awesome proton stream foam noodle thing. But yeah, man, I was so happy to get that thing, and I was busting ghosts all Christmas Day. You can even see the original Kenner Stay Puft Marshmallow Man plush doll in the background here. I'm sure I was busting that, whatever that pink thing on the floor is, that bear in the corner, that creepy ass Santa Claus, family photos. But yeah, man, real Ghostbusters were the shit. Anyway, I gotta get going. I think there's a giant monster outside. Happy holidays to everyone. Thanks again, Theo. Merry Christmas to you, sir. Catch y'all later.
Big up to Tokyo Toy Banzai every time, man. I really do love that guy and I love his channel. Also, because he's in Tokyo, I think he's actually celebrating Christmas now. Is that right? They're like 8 hours ahead. I know they live in the future over in Japan. So at this point, I'd got everything sculpted, and because it was such a complex build and there were so many different parts that needed to come together to make this a thing, I had to do it all on separate projects because my iPad were crashing. I need a new one. It's old. It's a whole thing. But I did eventually get it to a point where I liked it and his face looked okay. It didn't. I showed it to my friend Dan does, and he told me it looked like William Dafoe, which it did. He wasn't wrong. So I went back and I redid it and got everything to a point that I was happy with and was excited to get it over to print so I could actually see it in person. Now this was going to take hours, like days to get everything done, because like I just mentioned, I had to do it in lots of different parts and would probably have to reprint parts several times to get them all to fit together right. Basically a lot of waiting. Kind of like when you're a kid and you've got to wait for Christmas and it seems like it's taking forever, especially when there's a toy that you're specifically wanting. I don't know about nowadays, but when I was growing up, there was always that one toy every single year that had all the parents stressing out over because it was so hard to find. I'd love to know what some of the toys were that you remember being hot property when you were a kid. In fact, while you're thinking about it, I've got a friend Paul from a YouTube channel called The Heavy Spoilers Show, you might have heard of it, and he's got a great story about this exact thing.
So when I was very young, thanks for having me on by the way, Theo, but when I was very, very young, I was obsessed with Power Rangers, absolutely obsessed with it. Obviously the hot toy that year was the Megazord, everyone wanted it. Jingle All the Way, yeah, that was pretty much based on the Megazord. You couldn't just order it on the internet, and my mum was going in every single day trying to get the Megazord. From what I've been told, I was about 4 years old, so I wasn't too aware what was going on. I just wanted that bloody toy. Was never in, you know, if one did come in, someone else got it, and she did this for about 2 months. She used to work in the Metro Centre, and they had a big toy store there, and every lunch she'd head out and try and get this toy. And one day she managed to get it, and she came home, and my dad was like, oh, that's the remote control one. And apparently, from what she said, she broke down in tears because she'd been working so hard to try and get this Megazord just to make her little son happy, but she kept going, and I think it was the week before Christmas she managed to get her hands on one, and little Paulie Pooh Bear, he was a happy boy on Christmas Day. I've never forgot that story. You might even be able to see I've got a little Megazord Funko Pop over here. It's not the same thing, but I just keep this around to remind myself of what my mother had to go through to try and make me happy. It's just a little crappy Funko Pop one, but it just, every time I look at it, I just think about the little boy on Christmas who was made so happy by his mum, going out every single day because the internet didn't exist and you couldn't just order stuff and expect it. Had to work for those toys, and yeah, my mum did that for me. So I've always appreciated that, and yeah, it just makes me want to be that kind of dad to my kids. But luckily, I've got the internet, so I'll be just typing away. It's already arrived. I can hear the doorbell now.
Now obviously, it's always nice when you get that toy that you've been waiting for, the one that you put on your Christmas list, that you've been counting the days down to receiving. But what about when you get that toy that you didn't ask for? The one that you didn't want, the one that you open up and you're just like, why have you bought me this? I'm sure you people at home have got some stories like that as well. See, I know one person that this happened to, and honestly, I don't think he's ever been the same since.
Hello everyone, my name's Bill. I have a channel where I make stuff, and my name's Bill. That's why I called it Bill Making Stuff. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, yeah, so Theo Kane of Slimehouse TV has asked me to talk about my favourite Christmas memory. Now, I don't know if it's my favourite Christmas memory, but it's definitely a memory I have at Christmas. And it's basically, well, my parents were a bit strange, you know. I asked for a Game Boy game. I can't remember which game it was. I think it was Bomberman. Obviously, I didn't get that. I did get this big box under the tree. About so big, about, you know, quite a big box. I opened it up, and inside there was the most disgusting head I've ever seen. It was, the eye was falling out and had weird ginger hair. I thought it was my twin brother, but you know, and then he walked in, so it was okay, it wasn't him. Mum was like, go on, take it out, with like a psychotic look in her eye. So I did, you know, hesitantly. I was feared for my life. And I pulled this out. Apparently it's a toy called Rude Ralph. I didn't like it at the time. I didn't like the toy. Well, I had no idea what it was. But, you know, it's one of the toys I've still got from my youth. You know, I like him now. Probably because he's worth a bit of money on eBay, but yeah, that's my Christmas memory story. I blocked out the rest. Merry Christmas!
So as you can see, the Mandroid at this point was all printed. And as suspected, I had to print things multiple times to get the sizes right. I went through a lot of good resin to get this thing made, but because of all the different individual little parts that were going to be needed for it, I always kind of knew that this was going to be the case, so I purposely ordered in a lot of resin in advance so that I didn't run out. One of the things that I wanted to do as well was include some piping on this figure. In the movie, the Mandroid's got wires and pipes all over him, so I wanted to incorporate a bit of that. And also Playmates, who as you know are a huge influence on me, often incorporated a lot of pipes and wires into their figures, so this was also a little homage to them as well. So what I did was get some black Lego pipes, cut them down, and after sitting them in the holes that I'd pre-measured for them, it was safe to say that they kind of worked pretty perfect. What do you reckon? Also, while I'm talking about Lego as well, this feels like the perfect time to introduce our next special guest in this episode. A real OG in the UK YouTube vintage toy space, and a guy that definitely knows a thing or two about fixing toy problems with Lego.
Welcome to Toy Polloi.
I often find when putting on a coat or a hoodie that there will be some action figure or toy left in the pocket from the last time I wore it. This used to happen as a child, as I would always be playing with something and have a favourite that I wanted to carry around with me wherever I went. Now it's more likely that I've been working on a video and just popped it in there while moving things around for filming and just forgotten about it. Growing up, it was a tradition in our house that on Christmas Day you weren't allowed to open your main presents until after lunch, when everything had been tidied away and all the relatives had arrived. Prior to that, we could open up whatever Santa had left for us in our Christmas stockings at the end of my parents' bed. These would generally be sweets and small toys, often a Lego set or a Smurf. The bigger presents would have to wait until later. The problem was that we were also dragged to church to hear the Christmas service before lunch, and that as a child was a complete bore. All I wanted to do was sit in front of the telly, play with the new toys and eat sweets. Spending an hour listening to people talking and singing was not high on my list of things to do. To try and make the time go quicker, I would make sure that into my coat pocket would go one of these new smaller toys to entertain me. It wasn't possible to get the toy out and play on the church pews. My mum would have given me stern words if that had happened, but just having it there in my pocket to hold was enough to pass some of the time. A favourite pocket toy for me was the Fisher-Price Frogman I got one Christmas. I don't think this was a stocking full of toy, but one that my nan had got for me. This guy went everywhere with me for at least a year, and by the end of that time he pretty much had no paint left on him, could barely stand up because his limbs were so loose, but he had had so many adventures. I still find it rather comforting to find a toy in my pocket, which is maybe why so many seem to end up there, and it always reminds me of Christmas.
You know what's funny as well? I do the exact same thing whenever I've made a new toy and I've finished filming it. Before I put it on my shelf, I carry it around the house with me for a bit. I'll put it on the kitchen side while I'm making my food, or I'll put it next to me while I'm watching a film or playing the PlayStation. Maybe it's something that you just never go out of, or maybe it's something that I just never go out of. So at this point, I'd got the Mandroid all filed down and sanded and drilled, making sure that everything fit together nice, and it was time to get him painted. And when I took that recent trip to Outpost that I mentioned in the previous episode, I also picked up a nice Army Painter Silver, which I figured would be a good colour for his body and his armoured parts. And I was pretty confident that this was all going to look okay because it was just basic block painting, but the one thing that I knew was going to be a bit of an issue was painting his face. Now I'd done a little bit of extensive research, you could say, looking at human figures and how they paint faces on them. And the general thing that I found is when toy companies paint male faces, they paint the upper eyelid, the pupil in the eyeball, and the eyebrows, and the skin tone, but they never paint the lips. They only paint the lips on female figures, because it's hard to paint a male's face and then paint his lips without it looking like lipstick. And there's nothing wrong with a guy wearing lipstick, obviously. If you want to paint your lips, then you do you, brother. But the Mandroid certainly doesn't wear lipstick, and I want this thing to look authentic. So yeah, I knew painting the face and the skin tone was going to be a bit of an issue, but I was confident that I'd be able to make it work if I really concentrated on it. So what I'm going to do now is leave you again with one of my friends, but this is someone that you'll have seen many times on this channel because we've been on many a toy hunt together. He's a very cool guy, he's one of the nicest people that I know in the UK toy scene. Just never get between him and his retro games or his Yorkshire tea, because you might just see a side of him that's a little bit ghetto.
Retro Ghetto.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Retro Ghetto. So I'm from that generation that only got toys at Christmas and birthdays, and today I'm going to share with you a couple of my favourite childhood memories of receiving gifts at Christmas. First of all, I'm going to take you guys way back to 1993, and a 6-year-old version of myself was about to receive a life-changing gift. A gift that would not only cement me as a lifelong video game player, but would ignite a passion that would go on for 30 years of collecting, some may say hoarding, to the point where I've had to purpose build a room to house all this stuff that I love. And that was this glorious yellow box of happiness here, the Super Mario All-Star Super Nintendo console bundle. And whilst I do have earlier gaming memories of playing the Commodore 64 and the original Nintendo Entertainment System, this right here was the game changer. I'd seen Mario games before, but not like this, and to get 4 of the greatest games ever made on one cartridge, wow. Video game compilations are common within the industry today, but this was the original and in my opinion, to this day, the best. The same can be said for the system, so much so that I'm currently trying to source every single PAL Super Nintendo game that was ever released on the system, all 530 of them. But one thing that I've learned throughout my adult collecting journey is that no matter how many rare and expensive video games I add to my collection, I'll never replicate the feeling of opening this on Christmas Day morning. Fast forward now to 1998, and it was a tradition in my household that me and my brothers would circle all the gifts that we wanted for Christmas that year in the Argos catalogue. We were allowed a £100 budget each, and at the time it might as well have been thousands. It felt like such a vast number. And whilst my brothers were busy circling all the toys that they wanted in the catalogue, I had entered just one circle. That's right, I'd taken the unprecedented decision to blow my entire budget on just one gift. And that one item circled in the catalogue was a Lego set, but not just any Lego set. This was the Lego set number 6097, the Knight's Lord Castle. Ever since I saw this thing advertised on the television, I knew this was what I wanted. This thing contained trapdoors, secret rooms, knights, horses, witches, and even a skeleton. As soon as I opened this set on Christmas morning, 11-year-old me immediately began to assemble it, leaving some other presents still in their wrapping paper. I sat for a few hours and got this thing exactly as it was in the instructions. I was so proud of myself. This was my first ever big Lego kit that I'd built on my own. So much so that I picked it up, I went to go and show it to my grandma, and then disaster happened. I dropped it. There was bricks and minifigures strewn across the room, and I'm not ashamed to say that there was a few 11-year-old tears shed that Christmas morning. However, my mum said something to me that will stay to me this day, and that's that the fun of Lego is in the building. I took that on board and I immediately began to build it again. That's right, I built this thing twice on Christmas morning, and it's become such a strong, vivid, nostalgic memory of mine, so much so that I actually purchased that set again this year and rebuilt it. I didn't quite have the same magic or the passion for it as I did back then, so what I've since done is disassemble it, box it, wrap it, and I'm going to give it to my son on this Christmas morning, so hopefully he can share some of that love that I had way back when. And ultimately that's what it's all about, right? Creating those memories as children that we had, and yeah, memories that last a lifetime. I want to give you guys a massive thank you to listening to my Christmas memories. If you enjoy any of this stuff that I love, that I enjoy hunting and collecting, consider subscribing to the channel. Have a great Christmas, play your games, keep it retro. In a bit.
So at this point, the Mandroid was all painted and he was ready to have his final lacquer spray and then get assembled. I'd done his head and his arms separately, as you can see, on pegs so that you could move them around and give him a bit of the action figure feel. I didn't have his tank tracks so that they could roll. They are solid. I wasn't going to try and put a remote control in him or wheels or anything like that. I didn't want it rolling around my house. Although I have heard that sometimes toys can take on a life of their own and do things that you wouldn't expect, especially around Christmas time. You don't believe me? You just have a word with my friend Witty. She'll tell you all about it.
Hi Theo, hi Slime Alliance, Woody here, aka Whittle Goblin. I hope everyone's having such a wonderful holiday season. I'm super excited to be talking to you today. I'm so happy that Theo asked me to share with you a childhood Christmas toy memory. The first thing that came to mind for me was a Furby. So a little bit of backstory, I loved animals so much as a kid. I still do, and I really was just enamored with the very 90s trend of robotic pets. So Tamagotchi, Poochie, I wanted everything like that. Whenever we would go to the mall and we would go to KB stores, I would always run right to this table where they had this big display full of robotic pets, and it felt to me like a pet store from the future. I had this super active imagination and this love of animals, and it just combined where I was able to really project all of these qualities onto robotic pets, and I just loved them. But one of them stood out to me among all of them. It was Furby. Furby had its own language. They said in the ads that it would talk to you, that it would learn from you, and that blew my mind. I had to have one, so I begged and I begged and I begged and I begged my mom. It was out of budget. It was a high demand Christmas toy that year. I think it was $19.99, I want to say. And so I didn't expect to get one. So I was absolutely floored when Christmas morning there was a Furby under the tree. I was so excited and I played with it immediately, but really quickly I started to get this feeling of suspicion, and this feeling of suspicion turned to dread. It was just sort of spooky. There was something about it. But I felt really guilty about that because I had begged my mom for so long for this Furby that we couldn't afford, and now I had it, and I was really scared of it. I remember it randomly coming to life in the night. It was just chirping and chattering and laughing to itself, and it scared me so much, I was too scared to do anything. I just pulled my covers up over me. And then the next day when the sun came out and I was feeling much more brave in the light of day, I went up to it and I opened it up and I took its batteries out. I felt kind of bad, but I needed to do it. Mission accomplished, safety restored. But that very night, in the middle of the night, it started talking to itself again. And I couldn't believe it. I really thought that one of my brothers was pulling a prank on me, that they had put the batteries back in, so I ran up to it, I turned it around, I opened it up, and there was nothing in there. It was empty. There were no batteries. I screamed and I threw it in my closet for God knows how long, and I really thought that I had imagined that, but then when I brought this up to my mom recently, she went, "Oh yeah, that was crazy. How did it talk without batteries?" Anyways, now I have 2 Furbies and another one on the way, and I'm a little bit afraid of them, but I still really think Furby is a fun, interesting toy. I love the way they look. There's nothing that looks like them, except for those really weird bootlegs. I don't know if you've ever seen those. And this one is actually going to be kit bashed into... You'll see. And this one, the little Halloween one, he's just gonna sit on my shelf. So long as he doesn't start talking in the middle of the night. I actually haven't checked to see if these still work, so I'm gonna try to put some batteries in them. You know, this is my first time unpackaging a Furby because when I was a kid, my mom did it. See if he works. I don't think he works. Let's try the other one. He woke up. Hi. Whoa. He's biting me. Ew! He's kissing. This is crazy. Oh my god, the nostalgia that I'm feeling right now. This is wild. Are you gonna wake up in the middle of the night? Oh, now you're quiet. Is this what parenthood feels like? Thank you, Theo, for inviting me to share that story with you all today. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm really feeling my fear/love reignited for Furbies right now. I am feeling also inspired to make something new. Merry Christmas, everybody.
So it's almost time for me to reveal the Mandroid toy that I've been making in the background throughout this entire episode. But before I get to that, I wanted to share with you my Christmas story, a little memory that I've got that I want to share with you today. So the year must have been 1992. I'm about 5 years old. It's Christmas morning, I'm buzzing, opening up all my presents. I've got my little pyjamas on, my little mullet haircut, my little Ghostbusters firehouse. Sorry, Nick. Now, I'll have got many cool things this year. My parents always looked after me. Lots of things that would have made my Christmas magical back in 1992. But there were one thing that I remember opening, and not only thinking, like, why have I been bought this? But also something that was very unconventional to buy a little 5-year-old kid. It was like a legit, real little woodworking toolkit. And these were not no little tykes plastic tools or anything like that. These were actual tools made of wood and metal. It had a hammer, a mallet, a wood planer, screwdrivers, a saw, chisels. Just all things that a little kid shouldn't be playing with. But for whatever reason, my family thought me, at the ripe old age of 5, was old enough to receive my first toolkit. And I remember running around my house with it, thinking I was Thor with the mallet and hitting my sister with it. Basically doing everything with the toolkit other than what it was supposed to be used for. But then I remember, just a little bit after Christmas, my dad was watching a VHS and I walked into the living room and caught just a little glimpse of it, and it was just starting up and the trailers were playing. But what I saw absolutely blew me away. A cool cyborg dude with legs that were tank tracks, rolling down stairs and shooting at bad guys. A film called The Eliminators. Now, it wouldn't be for years until I found out the name of this movie. For a long time I thought I might have dreamt it up, like maybe I saw a trailer for Short Circuit and that's what I thought this was. But no, I do remember seeing this guy with tank track legs and I was so inspired by it that I picked up my little toolkit, I went to the shed where my dad kept his wood and started knocking together my own toy of, you guessed it, the Mandroid. A toy that will have not only been the first action figure that I ever created, but one that, unbeknownst to me, my mum kept for all these years, so that one day she could give it back to me. And that's exactly what she did. Now I understand this thing isn't perfect. I was only 5 years old when I made it, remember. But as you can see, I was trying to make a little articulated figure by having his arms move and his head move. And if I'd have never told you it was a Mandroid, you probably would have never guessed who it was. But this is how I remember him looking in my little 5-year-old brain when I saw my dad watching that trailer. But out of all of the gifts that I would have been ever given for Christmas, that was probably the most important, that toolkit, because it was responsible for me making this. Which, if you've been following my journey recently of me going on to create my own action figures and building a whole studio to do it, is pretty incredible. And I remember being a little bit disheartened at the time and looking at it and thinking it's nowhere near as cool as I wanted it to be, and it's certainly not as cool as the one that I just saw in that trailer. But either way, I still tried to create something, and even though I wasn't that buzzing about it at the time, my mum obviously thought it were cool, and that's why she put it away for all these years and just give it me back recently, and I'm so glad that she did. So when it came to me wanting to make a Christmas episode and me wanting to make a toy for it, they felt like there were no toy more fitting for me to make than the Mandroid. And I wish that I could go back to that little 5-year-old version of myself and show him this thing that I've created and just say like, your time isn't wasted. I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. Fuck my fucking life. So yeah, even though that little kid version of myself will have had no idea what he was sparking by going into the shed and getting wood and trying to make his own toy, I'd just love to let him know that like, if you stay this way and you never lose your imagination and you keep doing what you're doing, one day you'll grow up and you'll be able to make any toy that you could ever dream of. So as weird as this sounds and as stupid as I look right now, I wanted to create this thing for little Theo, because I think if little 5-year-old Theo could see what 35-year-old Theo can do all these years later, I think he'd be pretty blown away. So there you have it, my remake of Mandroid from the Eliminators. As you know, usually I try to go for that Playmates vibe, but with this guy being a little bit more realistic and the colour scheme turning out the way that it did, I think this sits very much more in that Kenner Terminator territory, which is not a bad thing, because as you know, I love those figures as well. He is still Playmate size though, so he can still display next to the Playmates figures and the other figures that I've made, so yeah, trying to keep everything in that scale, which is important to me, so that's also awesome. I also think the piping turned out really well, kinda like it were made for this figure, which is perfect. I also decided to go that extra mile, give myself more work basically, and add a nice little finishing touch of giving him a removable chest plate. Just because in the movie there's a scene where he removes his plate armor and you can see that he's got a burnt chest underneath, and there was no reason for me to do this, I literally just wanted to do it for myself. Something else I did as well, just to add more workload to something that was already a very tight schedule, I decided to do a little minifigure of the little droid that follows this guy and his team around in the movie Eliminators, Spot. It's a pretty simple design, it only took me a few hours to sculpt, but I think it was really worth it because I like to give them minifigures so they feel like Playmates figures, as you know. And I just kind of felt like if I don't make him a figure of that little droid, then who even am I? In terms of his colour scheme and how it all came together, I feel like it really worked. A little bit more realistic, like I said, than usual, but for this particular figure, I just think that that's what it needed. I could have gone really bright and added some blue metallic to the silver and stuff like I did with the arena horn, but for this particular toy, I think this worked. I would never normally do the dirt flicking up on the tank tracks if it was a Playmates figure, but the Toxic Crusaders did have a bit of a flicker of splatter of paint as well, so this is my little homage to that also. So overall, very, very happy with this figure. I think it's a great addition to the shelf of custom toys that I've been building up recently. And while I was working on this, I was also making the arena figure, building the studio at the same time, as you know. So there's been so much work on trying to get this thing finished in the background. I didn't even document like half of what went into creating this thing. And the fact that it did get finished is a bit of a Christmas miracle. So yeah, man, very, very happy with it. There's lots of Christmas memories that we will have made as kids that we keep with us forever. A lot of people watching this now have their own kids, and you'll be making new memories with them tomorrow morning. And I just hope that you know, no matter what you get your kids tomorrow, they're going to love opening it anyway. And if you buy them something and they break it within 5 minutes of getting it out of the box, or they throw it in a cupboard because it scares them, or they love it so much that you have to turn a blind eye while they sneak it into Sunday service, or the kid next door gets something even bigger and better, just know that none of that matters, and your kids will appreciate what you do for them the same way that we look back now on the stuff that our parents and our guardians and our loved ones got for us at Christmas time when we were little. And if you didn't manage to get them exactly what they asked for, then don't worry, you're still doing great. Your gifts and the memories that they bring will still be cherished and valued, because sometimes that gift that we didn't even know that we wanted is the one that turns out to be the most important. So whether you're spending Christmas with family this year, with your kids, with friends, or just kicking back on your own and having a chilled one, which I have done many, many times, I hope that you have a really nice day, and I hope that this video brought you a little bit of joy. I want to say a massive thank you to all my friends for coming along and sharing their Christmas stories. I hope you enjoyed mine, even if it did get a little bit deep. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to watch this video, especially on such a busy evening. For so many people, Christmas Eve is such a hectic time, trying to get kids to bed, trying to get presents wrapped and that kind of thing. So the fact that you've spent half an hour of it with me really, really does mean a lot. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that watches these videos. You really, really are appreciated. And just want to say on behalf of myself, have a very, very Merry Christmas. And I'll catch you in the next video, hopefully less teary-eyed. Pow!